Hi, I'm Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I was looking at a blog tonight that I'd written on Carl Jung, who was a famous Swiss psychoanalyst who had a significant impact on my life in terms of awakening within me a spiritual perspective on life. He was the one who said he didn't believe in God, he knew that God existed. He was a psychoanalyst, as I said. That was a very significant statement when I read that, and he was the one that really captured my imagination, for he was both an intellectual and a mystic. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the story of how I found him and the impact he made on my life experience. So this blog was published in February 2011, and it's called Carl Jung's Meaning of My Life. I'm also going to read for you a poem I wrote about Carl Jung, but I'll read this introduction first. I felt to post tonight about another person who inspired my life. I'm thinking how to describe this experience. In 1992, I started to experience a shift in my consciousness. I came from a background that was atheist. I was starting to question the idea of heaven and hell, and I realized that this, for me, was love and fear. I never resonated with the concept of a devil. For me, I couldn't see a God being anything other than love. Anyway, I moved to London with my husband, Paul. I started to have vivid dreams there, so vivid that they felt real, a half-waking state. I remembered one dream where I could see my arm reach out and up and touch a vine coming in through a sunroof of a car. I consciously moved my arm in the dream. That perhaps was my first feeling of the conscious and subconscious working together, because I was awake in the dream. And as I've just written, I still remember the dream today, which I do even now. I can clearly see the sunroof, and I can clearly see my arm going up through it and this vine that was there. It was a very powerful dream. I started to record my dreams and had many creative dreams. One dream, which proved to be a premonition, was a guy at a large public transport place. He was stocky with a white shirt and curly hair. He was walking up what seemed like an aisle. I remember him looking at the salt and pepper shaker. I then saw men in British rail jackets that were in orange, and I saw a person on the floor with blood. I then looked at the people's faces for a reaction. They were very shocked. Well, in real life, about 1 week later, I was at Farringdon Station in London, and I was catching the train. I saw a person on the floor with blood. The person had been stabbed. I saw British rail persons with jackets. I looked up to see the faces, and they were impassive. I didn't interpret this as not caring, but not showing their feelings. The dream showed me, because I saw in their dreams that they were all shocked. That is the power of dreams. Recording my dreams was my first attempt to dredge up my subconscious mind. I did this instinctively. I was just finding myself fascinated. Anyway, I found a very profound psychoanalyst that impacted on my life. Unfortunately, he was no longer alive, but he had a profound impact on my future. I first read a book mentioning the works of Carl Jung and Toynbee, and was instantly connected to the ideas. I found myself drawn to Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology. I then found another book called Memories, Dreams, Reflections. I found Carl Jung compelling and regarded his intellect as extremely sharp and deep. What fascinated me about him was the fact that he was a psychoanalyst who was exploring the subconscious and metaphysics. I was drawn to his intellect. It was very grounded and detailed, very interesting. Carl Jung is known for his work exploring the psyche, and I've got in brackets the soul, and spirit, and in brackets anima and self, so it's Pneuma/self. He spoke of the growth of inner and outer life on various levels of consciousness, and in brackets altered states, dreams, prayer, ponderings, inner voice, emotional life, etc. Moreover, he was known for his dream analysis. He studied Eastern and Western psychology, inclusive of alchemy, astrology, sociology, literature, and the arts. He was fascinated by symbols. Of course, dreams were a series of symbols. Interpretation is the tricky part. That is definitely the image of shifting sand in my mind. He talked about a process of individuation and the integrating of opposites, including conscious with subconscious. He spoke of the collective unconscious, archetypes and synchronicity. He was interested in connecting us to the instinct basis of our existence. He saw myth as the revelation of the divine life of man. Myths arise from the primordial ideas of humanity. An interesting quote by Jung stated that it is as if my work reached out beyond philosophy and theology. You could say it begins behind both of them, he said. The collective unconscious is omnipresent. Jung said he had learned not just knowledge, but insight into his own nature. Most of what he learned came from his errors and defeats. He also talked about being receptive to whatever came, good or bad. Then they are forever alternating, he says. He came to accept his own true nature as both negative and positive, and through that, everything became alive for him. He realized he couldn't force things the way he thought. It was to embrace and accept. Today, Jung is still impacting people through the commonly used Myers-Briggs type indicator developed from Jungian psychology. What I find interesting as I convey this to you was that I found Jung through synchronicity. I was in London. I had no idea who Jung was, but found that first book. Then I remember being in the Lucis Trust, and I found a book called the I Ching. These are about Chinese hexagrams, which are made up of 2 lots of trigrams. So there were 64 hexagrams in the I Ching. And it's for divination. So they used to use yarrow sticks, was what the Chinese used, these sticks. And they'd shake them and throw them, and they'd fall in a certain way. And of course, the I Ching talks about broken lines and unbroken lines, or what they call moving lines and broken lines. And they get answers through the formation of those yarrow sticks. In modern times, we use coins, heads and tails. Anyway, I found this book called the I Ching, and I opened it and I saw Carl Jung's name in the introduction. For a few weeks, I think I would just open a book and there was Carl Jung. I just go, I am not flicking pages. I'm literally opening and there's his name. I couldn't ignore the signals, and I remember laughing at it. It happened so much. Synchronicity talks about something repeatedly coming up in different ways. Jung describes an example of synchronicity when he first dreams of a fish. Then he sees a patient and she speaks of a dream about a fish. Jung then notices a fish jump up on the sea wall, and finally he has fish for dinner. So what he's noting is there's a series of issues around fish that come up in the course of his day, and he regards this as synchronicity. So he said, so I felt I was being inspired through synchronicity to look into Jung, was what happened to me. I read quite a few of his books, and it was he who led me through the door of metaphysics into the real world. At the time this happened, I was having amazing dreams. So it was timely, or as I've said, as a reality, meant to be and not chance. It was not chance. I was meant to find him. Anyway, 1 year later, my mother came into money after the death of my grandmother. I convinced her to travel out of Australia for the first time in her life. I invited her to come to the UK. At the time, I was finding the UK difficult and actually wanted to go home, but I decided to stay for her. I found the attitudes quite negative and the class system was apparent to me. We Australians are pretty casual. If we want to talk to the boss, we just go up and ask. However, what I found in the UK, there was a certain protocol. Often you would be answered through a third person. I found them hard to understand. I saw quite a bit of mental illness on the street as well. I was finding it quite isolating there. Even though Paul was with me, I found it a lonely society. There was the right way of doing things. If you don't fit in, there is the boat to Australia. Anyway, even though I was feeling a bit down about living there, I really wanted Mum to travel, so decided to stay for another year. Paul and I would then move to Market Harbour in the Midlands for my new research job. My mum came and we decided to drive around Europe in a camper van. I did have my challenges with my mum. She was on medication and was challenging. However, we pushed through and had a very memorable trip. It really opened her eyes. With the camper van, we all caught the ferry from Dover to Calais in France. Then we went to Belgium, Germany, and then on to Switzerland. My only desire on this trip was to visit Bolligen in Switzerland, which was the town where Jung lived. His house was on the shore of the Oberseine basin of Lake Zurich. We parked the camper van out the front of his house and my mother and stepfather waited there. Paul and I went onto the property. I could see his house, which is known as Jung's Bolligen Tower. He had built a small castle. This was built over a period of 12 years. I remember him getting in special stones to build this place. He found the building a way of grounding himself mentally, as the work he was doing took him out of his mind. The building was a symbolic representation in stone of his understanding of the structure of the psyche. In my poetry, I often write about the philosopher's stone. This indeed is an example of that. He stated that he went there to gain solitude, to become, and I quote, what I was, what I am, and what I will be. The past, the present, and the future, all in the one space. Interesting idea. He had no electricity or running water. His intention was to be simple. The silence surrounded him there. He lived in modest harmony with nature. He watched life come and go. According to Wikipedia, in 1950, on the occasion of his 75th birthday, Jung set up a stone cube on the lake shore, just west of the tower, inscribing it on 3 sides. One side contains a quote of the Rosarium Philosophorum, hic lapis exils extat pretio quoque vilis spurnatur astultis amateur plus ab edoctris. Now I'm reading Latin there, I believe. He's got in brackets the interpretation of what I've just said. This stone is poor and cheap in price. It is disdained by fools, but it is loved all the more by the wise. and close brackets, and the dedication, and this is in capital letters, in memoriam nat Ivitali Die, and then he's got LXXV CG Jung ex grat. There's a little bit more, but I won't read it. And he's got in quotes, in memory of his 75th birthday, CG Jung, out of gratitude, made and set up this stone in the year 1950. He brought blue stones, actually, to build Bolligen Castle, which is very interesting. I believe the blue stones were part of the building of Stonehenge, I believe. I might just have a quick look. You won't mind if I quickly zip onto the net. I'm always curious. So let's have a look. Stonehenge. I'll just say blue stones and see if that comes up. Yes, blue stones. The very large standing stones at Stonehenge are of sarsen, a local sandstone, but the smaller ones, known as blue stones, come from the Preseli Hills in the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. I might have a look at Avebury too. That's another site in the UK, which I visited. Yes, they're blue stones. Right, this is interesting. Magnetic blue stones. Ah, that could be interesting to know. These also came from the Preseli Mountains in Wales. So I wonder why blue stones. Also, you will find, I just want to see stone circles. So what I'm going to do, I actually went up to Orkney Islands in Scotland, which again is in the UK. I'm just going to go circles bluestone and see if they're the same. Bluestone. Yep. Look at that. So the reason I'm doing that is because Carl Jung was a very wise man, and he would have used those blue stones for a reason. Now, what would be really nice to know is why blue stones. I went to the Ring of Brodgar. You might want to check it out on the net. It's Brodgar. Very interesting. The oldest Neolithic site in the world was discovered up in the Orkney Islands. In fact, the year I was there, which was 2010, I met an American archaeologist when I was up there, and he said they'd just discovered a site that was temples, and they believe it was the oldest Neolithic site in the world. Blue stones. So what I might ask in my Google search is, what is the significance of blue stones? It's my researching brain. I like to understand things. The ancient Egyptians used lapis lazuli to represent heaven. Blue symbolises the Virgin Mary. Pure blue is the colour of inspiration. I'm getting colours here. That's not quite what we're after here. We want to know about the blue stones. Okay, this is pulling up crystals, but crystals themselves are extremely powerful too. Actually, an energy source, believe it or not. Bluestone Wikipedia is probably a good place to go. We'll just see if they have a deeper understanding. Just having a look because it's a bit descriptive there. Talking here about Stonehenge. The bluestones at Stonehenge were placed there during the third phase of construction at Stonehenge around 2300 BC. It is assumed that there were about 80 of them originally, but this has never been proven since only 43 remain. Now they're talking about their weight, they're going into description on them, but I'm looking for what are the properties of bluestones? Are they magnetic? It'd be interesting to know. A summary of the major aspects of the Stonehenge bluestone conundrum was published in 2008. In the same year, a book devoted specifically to the problem of bluestone provenance and transport concluded that Stonehenge blue stones are essentially an ill-sorted assemblage of glacial erractus. That's a funny statement. I don't buy that. They don't know. I'm going to just hazard a guess. Bluestone, magnetic. Might be connecting with the magnetic field. They call it magnetic bluestone. Ah, here we go. The Avebury experience, magnetic bluestones. I just had to suss that out because when you're looking into metaphysical matters and things like Stonehenge, Avebury, all these sacred sites around the world, these civilizations were highly advanced, more advanced than we are. And they would have chosen these stones for a specific reason. I'm very open to knowledge in all its forms. It doesn't have to be book knowledge nor scientific knowledge. The metaphysical, the word I'm looking for a word here, which is, I'm feeling it. What is it? Alchemy is the word that I was just feeling there. And alchemy is to do with transmutation of one form to another. On the metaphysical level, it's more to do with transmutation of negative into positive. So they were alchemists in these ancient civilizations is what I'm getting the feeling of. See, I use my inner feeling to determine where I search for knowledge. I'm not restricting my mind. I'm not looking at the engineering properties of something. I'm interested in why things were used and what were the properties of them in terms of expanding a spiritual awareness is what I'm looking at. So let's have a look at what they're saying here. I'll just have a look for magnetic so I don't have to read the whole article. Okay, magnetic stones and yin water. The blue stones are highly magnetic. In fact, they are 3 to 4 times the magnetic field strength of the other stones in the monument. And this may explain why they were deemed magical and transported hundreds of miles across rough terrain and used in the construction of Stonehenge, if indeed they were. Got to keep an open mind, you never know. Maybe there was other ways. In the 1950s, the field archaeologist and master dowser Guy Underwood surveyed Stonehenge and plotted the course of several underground streams in the area. These streams are a combination of yin and yang waters, making the energy field admitted very healing, as yin water emits a Hz frequency of 10 Hz. Isn't that interesting? A beneficial field. The megalithic architects of Stonehenge carefully align the blue stones above these meandering underground combination streams. Okay, so what we're getting here is we're getting magnetic stones, we're getting yin water, which is emitting a frequency. So I'm guessing here, amplification through magnetics. That's my guess. Okay, it says making energy, as well as being emitted a healing Hz field, underground water is an excellent conductor of electricity, and the chalk down land of Salisbury Plain is perfect for generating natural electrical currents. Isn't that interesting? A negative charge is left behind in the chalk, and as opposites attract, the result is an electrical current is concentrated in the top few feet of the ground. For centuries, archaeologists have puzzled over the fact that why large standing stones, despite their vast weight and height, were only placed into the ground a few feet. The megalithic geomancers, that's to do with geometry, so they're feeling for, I'm just guessing here, sacred geometry, we're clearly tapping into Earth's electricity. I would say ley lines there, which charge the stones with unseen energy. Again, I'm guessing from my inner feeling. What I'm perceiving from this is that the stones, the large standing stones, were not very deeply placed in the ground, which they're saying. But they were tapping into the Earth's, what I would say, ley lines, which is an electrical field, very high energy electrical field. And it charged the stones. So the point of positioning those sites over those energy fields was to charge up those stones. And the water was some sort of amplification. Maybe it was the water that amplified the magnetic field around the stones. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. But this is the thing. You just laterally think. You just imagine, okay, well, what could that mean? So what's being said here is this person is saying, I suggest that standing stones can filter the electrical charge through their crystal lattice network. From Stonehenge to Silicon Valley in California, megaliths and microchips share a common premise. All megaliths have a cubic crystal lattice construction. Imagine a continuous set of small cubes interlinked through the entire stone, and with atoms at the corners of each cube. This is identical to the modern-day semiconductor microchips grown in laboratories and which have revolutionized the electronics industry. Physicists have merely duplicated the stone's lattice structure. Thus, a megalith can be regarded as a semiconductor microchip, which theoretically has the capacity to store energy and information. So if you want to go there, that's called www.theavebury.co.uk/magnetic_bluestones.html. I can also put that when I upload this video. So that's a little bit of lateral thinking. So let's go back to Carl Jung, because I was curious if you might remember about the blue stones, because he would have had a purpose for it. So in Bolligen, Jung did a lot of his painting, writing and sculpture. This place enabled him to do his work effectively. This site was off limits to the public. I didn't know at the time. Anyway, Paul and I walked around this property. I sat where Carl Jung sat and just imagined him reflecting whilst looking at Lake Zurich. I saw the symbols that he had carved into the castle walls and peppered around the site. I understood that the tower represented the ego. It is funny, as I write this today, I realise this was a sacred site. And you know how I just laterally went off then? That's because I'm following my inner feeling. I'm so used to following my feeling these days. So as I wrote this blog, I realised it was a sacred site, and indeed I'm right. Having been to many around the world myself, as I said, I've been to Stonehenge, Avebury, I've been to Glastonbury, I've been to Orkney Islands up in Scotland, I've been to Newgrange in Ireland, just out of Dublin, and that also had standing stones and apparently a crystal mound with spirals. That was Newgrange. When I went over to Mexico, I went to the Mayan pyramids in Tulum, Chichen Itza. I also travelled down through Central America. So I went to Tikal in Guatemala, travelled down to San Jose in Costa Rica. Then I went to South America. I went to Machu Picchu, the Inca civilization in Peru. Can you believe when I was travelling along mountain, it was very tight. I was in a minibus, a whole heap of people, and we were driving on a road around a mountain with there was no safety rail. So if you had a little accident, you could tip over and actually go down the mountain. Huge mountains. These are the Andes Mountains. And can you believe, on the side of a mountain, I saw someone had written in must have been huge writing. I don't know. They obviously scraped out of the land because it's on the side of a mountain. See God is what was written in huge lettering. So some people had actually carved out of that mountain, see God. It was amazing. So just a C and G-O-D. Machu Picchu was phenomenal. an incredibly sacred experience, even just going up into the mountains themselves, going up towards Machu Picchu at 4 in the morning. You're just struck by the enormous majesty of nature. I've never seen anything like the mountains that I saw there. I climbed to the top of Machu Picchu, Wanu Picchu, that's the mountain behind Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu, if you look down from the mountain behind it, is in the shape of a condor. That's an eagle. When you're up on top of Wanu Picchu, looking at the mountains all around you, you see the mist that's hanging on these mountains. You are just in a state of awe at how incredibly beautiful this place was. Now, if you look into the architecture of Machu Picchu, there's no mortar. In a lot of the sacred sites, if not all, there is no mortar holding things together. They actually precisely built. There were, in Machu Picchu, there were toilets too. They were sophisticated. They had plumbing, their own sewerage system. They had swales cut out of the side of the mountain, terraced. And they had many, many buildings and lots of sacred places on the site. They were deeply spiritual people. One of the things that I took away from that experience is that the Incas were into equality. No person was ever left in poverty. Everyone was treated equally. So I've been very fascinated by this. I just feel to move on to a couple of other sacred sites. I went to Egypt and obviously saw the pyramids on the edge of Carew. These are geometric shapes that were phenomenal from the sky. And when I went on a camel around them, I was struck by these formations that I believe were not human. I saw the Sphinx. I can't even barely grasp the significance of the Egyptian civilization. I have, rudimentary knowledge of it. But I was really, really astounded. I also went to Uluru in Australia, which is where I'm from, and I felt the sacredness of Uluru, which used to be called Ayers Rock. It's in the middle of Australia. Everything's flat in all directions. And you've got this huge rock. Interestingly enough, there's another large, I don't know if you call it a monolithic rock, but let's just say a large rock, not far from Uluru. Just trying to remember what it's called. It's actually bigger. It's 40 kilometres right round the base of that particular rock, because that was the first one I saw when I was driving towards Uluru, and I thought it was Uluru for a minute, and I thought, oh, that doesn't look right. It's very big. I've just forgotten the name of it. I wonder if I can quickly find it. It's a massive rock, and it's private land from memory. It's private land. Just seeing if I can quickly find. Oh, Mount Connor. Mount Connor, it's called. So it's very close by, and they are called monoliths. Someone else said that they can't believe that they mistook the other rock for Uluru. But Mount Connor is really interesting. I wonder if that's a sacred site as well. See, I'm interested in what the Indigenous people think about this. Yeah, I've got a picture of it up on my screen now. Yeah, I'd say many tourists get confused. They do. So I'm going to look at Mount Connor just for a sec, because I'm feeling I'm being moved to have a look at it. This is how I'm tapping into the universal, I'm sort of feeling to say unified field. Because I've got a very open heart and a very open mind, I just allow myself to be moved. And you'll find, I'm sure a lot of people are like this too, like scientists surely when they're doing research, probably going, oh, go off in that direction, go off in that. Because things can often lead you to what you're really looking for. So Mount Connor, and I'm just going to look at Indigenous beliefs around that and just see what they think. Mount Connor. Let's have a look at Aboriginal Beliefs connected with Uluru. When I was at Uluru, just might as well bring this one in as well, I actually wanted to meditate on top of the rock, and there was a sign saying, don't climb the rock. This was to respect the Indigenous people. So that night I went into my tent and I literally asked, I just said, if you don't want me to climb the rock, then you have to send me a sign. This is my scientific approach to metaphysics. I don't believe anything on face value. I have to have a sign. And you won't believe it. You may believe it. Indigenous women came to me in my dream and they impressed on me to walk the base, which I did. And I remember sitting under trees and feeling enormous peace as I sat there. I felt I was them. I felt the oneness in that moment. So what they say about Aboriginal beliefs connected with Uluru or Ayers Rock might be well known around the world as. All parts of the rock of Uluru was believed to have been created in the Dreamtime by about 10 Dreamtime spirit people. Most of the southern face was created by the battle between Liru, poisonous snakes, and the Kunya, carpet snakes. Minor parts of the southern face were created by 2 other totemic creatures, Linga, which is the sand lizard, and Meta Lungana, a sleepy lizard. The northwestern corner and most of the northern face were created by the activities of the Mala, and they've got in brackets hare or wallaby people. Parts of this section of the rock was created by a number of other Dreamtime creatures, Linga, in brackets sand lizard, Tajinderi, Tajinderiba, Willy Wagtail woman, in brackets, and her children, the Yalanya, Kurupanya, the spirit dingo, who destroyed most of the Mala men and their families. Lunba, in brackets kingfisher woman, who tried to protect them. Well, that's very interesting. They often see themselves as those animals. Serpents. So anyway, the Dreamtime is very interesting. I'll just have a quick look to see if Mount Connor has any significance. I don't know if a lot is written about Mount Connor. Its elevation is 859 metres. They're not saying how big it is. Oh, yes, they are. Mount Connor, also known as Attila and Artilla, and occasionally found as Mount Connor, is an Australian mountain located in the southwest corner of the Northern Territory, 75 kilometres southeast of Lake Amadeus, at the border of the vast Curtin Springs cattle station in I'm trying to say their language, Pitjantjatjara country. Please forgive me, Indigenous people listening to this. You'd have to speak it first so I could hear it. It reaches 859 metres above sea level and 300 metres above ground level. It's horseshoe-shaped. Oh, okay, it's part of the same vast rocky substrate thought to be beneath Uluru Ayers Rock and Katatuja. That's interesting, the Olgas. The Olgas is another highly recommended site. It looks like a moonscape, Olgas, but they're all connected. So Uluru Ayers Rock, if you like, they call the Olgas Katatuja. Again, forgive me for my translation, pretty bad. And now they're saying that Mount Connor is also connected. So this is a massive system. They say it can be confused with Uluru. It was named by William Grossi in 1873. But I'm saying that Attila is probably the indigenous. I don't know if that's the indigenous name. But this is interesting. It's close to the Seven Sisters Dreaming. And of course, the Seven Systems is the Pleiades star system. You might be fascinated to know. they had the Pleiades as part of their metaphysical dream. I'm sort of hesitating here because I don't know a lot about the Indigenous history, but I do know that they're aware of the Pleiades because when I was at Woomera, the local Indigenous Aboriginals talked about the Seven Sisters as the Pleiades star system. So that's worth investigating for those of you interested in looking at cosmology in connection with sacred sites. Very, very interesting. Well, they haven't really got much more information about that, but I just sort of felt to go there out of curiosity. Now, I'll continue along here. So back to Carl Jung. So what I've just said is I noticed it was a sacred site, and that's what took me to Uluru just then and investigating that. And Machu Picchu and the Egyptian pyramids. And I might just quickly state that on my trip around Australia, I did actually see another Stonehenge, which surprised me. It was on the side of a road, so there may well be more here in Australia as well. So I sat at Lake Zurich, looking at Lake Zurich where Carl would have sat, and I remembered looking at the sculptured beautiful images, the symbolic images he'd carved into his castle made out of bluestone. So I walked through a forested area and I believe I found his grave. Although I could be wrong, it was a mound and I knew Carl would never mark the grave as they are only testimonials to the living. When the physical body goes, it goes. However, the spirit is eternal. He knows that is not his last resting place. I walked further reflecting and then to my surprise, a guy turns up with 2 Alsatian dogs. I got a bit of a fright. Turns out my mum had already spoken to this guy and told him I came from Australia and I was a fan of Carl Jung's. Thanks, Mum. I asked him if he was the caretaker and he said yes. My inner feeling was that he was not, that he was family. I looked into Carl's bibliography, which I had in the camper van, and yes, indeed, I'd met the grandson. I felt I needed to go there to make Carl Jung real for me. The dream state is very vague and hard to remain grounded, as it is another world different to what we perceive as the real world, as it is the world of myth and symbols. In truth, it is the latter world that is more real. That becomes apparent as your life becomes moved by the unseen more, by inner feelings, intuition, and loving intentions. Interesting to think or indeed feel of it in that way. So yes, this sort of metaphysical world is the feeling world. That's why you'll find a lot of women are interested in these types of things, because we're very much dominant in the feeling area. The intellect we see or feel is the servant to the heart. It's not the other way around. And so consequently, those things that are perceived as invisible, which people may say are not real, but they are, definitely. Indigenous people were more feelers, they were more feminine. And when I say feminine, I'm not saying female, I'm saying the feminine's receptive. The masculine's more out there and action-oriented. And of course, there can be males and females in both of those categories of masculine and feminine. But Indigenous people would tend to be more of the feminine, which makes them receptive to the things they can't see. Thus, the spiritual reality becomes dominant over the material reality. So what we're really talking about here is orientations in respect of the psyche. Carl Jung investigated as a psychoanalyst. He's a psychiatrist. He's investigating the dream states and the symbolic value of those dream states. Is it real? Is there a universal unconsciousness? Was what he was exploring through these various symbolic states coming up again and again. He was regarding the world as symbolic, and life is flowing out of these symbols. It's very interesting. The anima and the animus, the alpha and the omega. So Carl Jung would have been highly familiar with all the sacred sites in the world. He would have investigated those because he was interested in the symbolism and what it truly meant. And of course, symbols can be like codes. They can actually imprint. Certainly I got that feeling when I saw the spirals at Newgrange in Ireland, just a little ways out of Dublin. It was very interesting. So moving on with that, I needed to make him feel real for me because I'd read his books and I just needed to go there. So in my blog, I'm saying I'll finish with this last quote that just inspired me to add it to this blog. I really get what he is saying. He says, and I quote, "By bearing the opposites, we can expose ourselves to live in our humanity. We have to realize the evil is in us. We have to risk life to get into life. Then it takes on a colour. Otherwise, we may as well read a book." End quote. The mirror image of evil is live. So the word evil, if you turn it around, is live. And that living is really an enlivening of who we are. It's feeling really enlivened. What we've done is we've sedated society through the rhythm of routine and through the way that we've been taught and trained. In the metaphysical stuff and in these earlier times, people were more in attunement with who they are, and they had a very deep knowledge of geomancy, alchemy, energy. They had their own spiritual philosophies, which created the unity that was necessary to bring peace to places. They were very, very open to life, whereas we've become more closed down to life, and in fact we plug in the technology and we believe the books are fact, but they're actually just words in books, and I don't minimize all the hard work people have done, so please understand that. What I'm just saying is that from my own experience, when I wrote diaries, even when I did analysis, I saw that the words could not contain the true meaning behind what I was trying to communicate. In fact, being a clown was far, far easier for me to communicate non-verbally love to the humanity in what was probably tapping into something primeval within myself. Because the humour is very ancient. That sense of connectedness to humanity is very ancient. And it's our true nature. So somehow, through the archetype of the Fool, which is what I explored, I was able to tap into the humanity within myself, and I saw the world as one. And because I wasn't in fear as I was looking upon the world, and because I was coming from a great sense of really strong joy, I believe I saw people as they truly are. And when people came into my presence as a clown, I saw them light up. I felt them enliven because they got excited at seeing something so different in their space. That was very positive. And then they joined in. You know, I had many times when I've danced with strangers and laughed and, you know, it really felt strong connection to other human beings from different cultures. We may not speak the same language, but we felt the common unity, which is a community. Now, I've just finished off reading this because I've just noticed something interesting. You have to prove these things to yourself. Don't take my word for it. This is just my experience. What I've said in the blog here is don't be an observer of life. Throw yourself into it with the depth and become fearless. I'm so glad I did everything I wanted to do. It took courage at times, but life is short. I'm not going to live in regret, and neither will you. That is why you are here now. That's why you're watching this video. You want to live deeply. See this as a stepping stone to your own philosopher's stone. So in my case, Carl Jung and of course Lao Tzu, which is the ancient Chinese philosopher. These were my earliest teachers. And I still feel very much their influence today, as universal truth is universal. So what I'll do in the next video is I'll read the poem that I wrote about Carl Jung, and I'll send to you great love and joy and symbolism. You can see the symbols here. Isn't it amazing? That was from Nepal. This was given to me when I was up in the Western Himalayas, as was this. You can see the symbols. And if you look behind me, of course, my friend John, who's a clown, he made that one. And you can see the human beings emanating out from the centre cross, which I would imagine is the spiritual centre of humanity. That he's created, if you like, an energy of movement coming out from that sacred centre. I would call that the aliveness, although John may have a different viewpoint. But as you can see, because it's symmetrical, that's the mirror image, things fold out into symmetry. Very clever. So I send you love, peace, mystery, alchemy, metaphysics, and above all, an open mind to look upon life with great joy. It's an amazing world that we're living in. Thanks for watching.